A mother's instinct to protect her children is a universally acknowledged truth. However, there are moments when what seems necessary may not be the best course of action. Desperate acts born out of a mother's love can sometimes lead to unforeseen and negative consequences. February 11th marked a turning point in the life of Sandra Bell, a single mother from Ohio who had been bravely raising her family alone for over 3 years. To understand the pivotal moment that would alter the course of her and her children's lives, we must first delve into the background and context of her story, revealing the challenges and decisions she faced in her quest to care for her loved ones. Although sometimes what is necessary is not always the right thing to do, Sandra Bell was a 32-year-old young mother who had lived her entire life in the small town of Dayton, Ohio. There she was born and raised as the only daughter of a humble and hardworking couple who ran a small home-cooking restaurant where she would later fall in love with and marry the one she always considered the only love of her life, Jonas Bell. Jonas and Sandra were high school sweethearts, the typical teenage love that no one believes will survive after high school, but to everyone's surprise managed to overcome distance and time, culminating in the couple's wedding when they were only 22 years old. The couple had a prosperous and happy marriage for many years, becoming parents to 2 beautiful children, Jack and Emily, who filled the Bell home with happiness and joy. However, the couple's fate was doomed to misfortune, going from bliss to suffering in a matter of weeks. Jonas worked for a major construction company, and every day he spent 8 hours in the air helping with the construction of large buildings all over the city. It wasn't his dream job, and his wife didn't like him risking his life like that, but it paid very well, and they needed the money to support the family. Sandra's husband had been in the industry for more than 10 years, and nothing bad had ever happened to him until one fateful day while working on the construction of a luxury hotel when a small misstep more than 100 meters up cost him his life. We regret to inform you that your husband, Jonas Bell, has passed away. It was a terrible accident. The emergency services were unable to do anything to save his life. These were the words of the policeman who called Sandra on the morning of her husband's death. Since that morning, Sandra and her 2 children's lives had never been the same. The happiness and well-being she had achieved with Jonas vanished after his burial, and all she was left with was the title of widow, a house she couldn't afford, and 2 small children to support and make understand their father wasn't coming back. The only family she had left was her mother, but she was a woman over 65 years old who lived more than an hour away from her and her children, so she couldn't count on their help either. For the first few months after Jonas's death, Sandra was able to get by thanks to the severance pay she received from the company where her husband worked and a little savings they had been storing up for emergencies, and certainly, that's what it was. However, everything started to get complicated for her after a year. The money was barely enough to pay the rent, house expenses, and food, not to mention all the expenses associated with the education of the children, who were 10 and 2 years old at the time. Her mother was sending her money every month, but nothing was enough. She had to start working, and she had to do it as soon as possible. Otherwise, she'd be left without a house to live in. Faced with this new reality, she had to do something she never would have done if she had any other choice: look for a job and leave her children at home alone. It was a very difficult decision to make, and she didn't have the full support of her mother, but it was the only way out that the young mother saw to get ahead and ensure the welfare of her kids. "I can't stay at home waiting for a disaster to happen, Mom. I don't have any money left to pay the rent or buy food for the children. I can go hungry, but they can't. I'll never let my children go hungry or miss school. I will only be gone for a few hours. Jack is older, and he'll be able to check on his sister while I'm gone. I'm sure I'm doing the right thing. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it," Sandra told her mother over the phone after accepting a job as an evening waitress at a pizzeria near her home. For the first month, everything seemed to go well. The children were unharmed in her absence, and if she needed anything or had any questions, Jack had learned to call his grandmother on the phone to talk to her while his mother was away. In addition, she had also spoken to a friend who lived nearby so that she'd stop by every hour or two to check that everything was going well. It seemed that everything was stabilizing in her life again, and the problems were disappearing until the peace was over. Sandra didn't notice anything and thought that no one would notice what was happening, but apparently they did. The neighbors who lived right across the street had been monitoring her and didn't hesitate to file a complaint against her, a complaint that would turn Sandra Bell's world upside down and break her heart. One evening, 2 police officers showed up at her work, Little Caesars, and arrested her in front of everyone. Bell was charged with endangering her children by leaving them home alone for several hours and spent the night in jail. The children stayed at a friend's house while their mother tried to make the police understand that she wasn't abandoning her children and that everything she was doing was to take care of them. However, the police had too much evidence against her, and it would take more than her word to believe her and drop the neglect and abuse charges. "Mrs. Bell, do you understand that what you've done is very serious? Do you have someone who can corroborate your version of events? You have the right to call an attorney, and if you don't have one will be provided for you." The police officers guarding her spoke to her as if she was a criminal and barely listened to her. "I love my children. I would never abandon them. If I left them home alone, it was to work so I could have money to survive. You have to believe me. Please let me out," shouted Bell desperately from her cell. Seeing that the mother continued to insist on her innocence, the police decided to carry out a small investigation to verify that what Sandra was telling them was true. That led them to Bell's house, where they discovered the terrible situation the family was going through. They discovered the house where Bell lived with the children was in very poor condition and in urgent need of renovation. There were leaks in several rooms, the refrigerator was practically empty, and the heating hadn't been used for months. It was unbearably cold outside, but the mother couldn't afford to turn it on, which explained the number of blankets scattered around the house. After their discovery and a thorough analysis of the complicated family situation of Sandra and her 2 kids, the police decided to release her and let her return to her children. It was only a few hours, but for Sandra, it was a real nightmare. She had never been separated from her children for so long, and she couldn't wait to hold them in her arms again. However, before leaving the prison and returning to them, Belle was in for an unexpected surprise, this time one that would make her smile and help her overcome problems. After verifying that her story was true and seeing the deplorable conditions in which she was living with her 2 kids, the police agreed to help her find a new temporary home for her to live in while the fund was being set up to finance all the renovations to her current home. "You're free, Mrs. Bell, but remember that what you have done is not allowed. Even if your intents are good, no child can be home alone. Do you understand?" said the police officer, releasing her. "Of course I understand. I'd never have parted with them if I had any other choice. Thank you so much, I'll never forget it," Belle replied, very excited at the thought of returning to her children and having the chance to start over with a clean slate. As promised, a week after her release, the police set up a GoFundMe for her. Belle didn't have high hopes for the initiative to succeed, but she would soon realize how wrong she was. Initially, the crowdfunding campaign was supposed to raise around $5,000, but within days, donations flooded in and Belle received more than $165,000 in donations. It was truly insane. "I can't believe it. It's a dream. And I thought no one was going to show solidarity with me," said the mother, surprised to see the amount of money raised in just a couple of weeks. Belle was amazed by the support she received from all over the country, especially after sharing her story of having to leave her kids at home to work. She had expected criticism but got the opposite. Surprisingly, the biggest donations came from Pierre P. Thomas, a music label co-founder who gave $10,000, and JaVale McGee, a Cleveland Cavaliers player who donated $5,000. Their donations weren't anonymous and were part of a strong social media campaign that helped improve Belle's image and gave her strength. Pierre Thomas shared on Instagram that he understood Belle's situation because his mother had been in a similar position, needing to work to support them. He emphasized that Belle deserved all the help she could get. After the successful fundraising and the attention Belle's story received on social media, she wanted to thank everyone for their help and take responsibility for her situation. Belle plans to use the money from GoFundMe to renovate her house and create a beautiful home for her children. What do you think of this story? Let us know in the comments section. I hope you like this video. Please give it a thumbs up and share it with your loved ones. Also subscribe and press the bell icon to never miss the update from our channel. Thank you.